Hello, Mario.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks God. Good.
All right. How's your wife?
And slow progress, but making some headway. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely.
How have I? Yeah.
Okay. Send her my regards. Our regards.
What's that?
Send her our
Okay,
regards.
Mario, I will. I'll tell her thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Well,
As long as it's forward.
yes.
That's it. Yeah.
Does she get up at all or no?
Yeah, yeah. With a walker, she can walk a bit. Not too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to be starting 86 today.
What page? 86?
Yeah.
86.
Well, I say that and then he says 85 or 87. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we were on the Piskei Tshuva.
Let's see. Yeah, but I marked it at the end of that.
Okay.
Okay. Sai,
Yes. Hi, how are you? How's everyone?
do you get my messages with WhatsApp?
I do. I do. Thank you so much.
No, but yesterday you connected and it was no Tzurba yesterday.
Yes. I you know, my schedule has changed on Tuesdays, so I'm going to be
Oh,
always coming late. So I ran in the door because I missed the last week or two. And the first thing I did is I went straight to the computer and I just turned
ah,
it on. I go, what's happening? So then I went to the message. I go, the day I finally was able to make it, it was Wednesday.
okay.
That's
All
what
right. No, I was worried you may not be getting the message. Okay.
no. I got it. I got it. So
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Okay, I think we're still in Tfilas Haderech. Just
Yeah.
finishing up here.
Page 86. I don't tell.
I think did we do the 85? Did we do the Piskei Teshuvos?
I think so. I marked at the end of it.
Yes, we did that, correct. According to Rav Vosner, so we're on 86. According to Rav Vosner, the Chazon Ish and Piskei Teshuva, in explanation of this approach, one would recite Tfilas Haderech when traveling from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, to Beit Shemesh or Bnei Brak, since one has left the city, even if there are other towns along the way within a parse of each other. However, they agree that one does not recite it within the city, since Chazal never instituted such a practice. What would these poskim say concerning travel from one city to another with suburban homes and residential areas spanning the entire distance? It would seem that all the poskim mentioned would agree in this case that one does not recite Tfilas Haderech with the concluding bracha, as this is treated as a case where one never left the outskirts of the city. For example, one who travels from the 5 towns to Manhattan would not recite Tfilas Haderech since one has never left the city limits. However, one who travels from Silver Springs to Philadelphia, from Toronto to New York, or from London to Manchester would certainly recite Tfilas Haderech. Rav David Haber, in his A Traveler's Guide to Tfilas Haderech, offers additional guidelines. So if one travels the distance of 2.8 miles out of town, one should recite Tfilas Haderech. However, town does not mean the city limits. Rather, to be considered a long enough trip, the traveler must meet both of the following 2 conditions. He must travel 2.8 miles past an open area where there are no houses. He must leave the general metropolitan area of the city. So besides long distance trips, like New York to Detroit, this would include shorter out-of-town trips, for example, Lakewood to Muncie, or Lakewood to New York, as these trips meet both of the above trip conditions. Although much of the area surrounding the Garden State Parkway and Highway 95 is indeed built up, there are stretches that are not, and one would recite Tfilas Haderech when crossing those areas. In addition, one who crosses any of the bridges from New Jersey to New York may also be crossing over an inhabited area greater than a parsa, i.e. the water, as mentioned later in the article. I don't think that the span of the Golden Gate Bridge spans 2.8 miles. So I don't know what it's talking about in the footnote. Maybe there's uninhabited area on both sides of where the bridge is that qualifies for that. The following are examples when Tfilas Haderech is not recited. If you drive 35 miles from Yeshiva Sharat Torah in Queens to the Yeshiva of Staten Island, since the trip, albeit lengthy, was entirely in the city of New York, Tfilas Haderech is not recited. Chaim, we're on page 86. We're dealing some of the areas of your questions. If one drove 5 miles from Tel's Yeshiva in Chicago to Yeshiva Beis Medrash LaTorah in Skokie, although Skokie is a different city, it's still in the metropolitan area of Chicago. So this does not constitute a trip that requires Tfilas Haderech. And the entire route is a built-up area. If you drive 20 miles via US 101 Hollywood Freeway and Ventura Freeway from Yeshiva Gedol of Los Angeles to Mesivta of Greater Los Angeles near Calabasas, since it is built up along the way with houses, Tfilas Haderech was not recited as the driver never left the metropolitan area. Typically, Tfilas Haderech is recited during a long stretch of highway with no houses on either side, or when crossing a bridge over a wide river, which is a stretch of road that obviously has no houses. The following are examples of the ideal locations for the recitation of Tfilas Haderech when traveling from Baltimore out of town on the various interstate highways. When traveling from Baltimore to New York or New Jersey on I-95, the ideal location is when crossing the bridge over Big Gunpowder Falls, as that is the first area of the trip that is not built up. When traveling westbound on I-70 to Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or beyond, you recite Tfilas Haderech when crossing the Patapsco River Bridge. When traveling south on I-95 to Richmond or beyond, you can also recite Tfilas Haderech on the Patapsco River Bridge. When traveling to Ocean City, Maryland, recite Tfilas Haderech on I-97 after exit 10 as you cross the Severn Run. When traveling northbound on I-83 to Harrisburg and Toronto, recite Tfilas Haderech when crossing the Western Run Bridge. Poskim also discuss when to recite Tfilas Haderech when flying. According to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, one need not even wait to traverse the minimum distance of a parsa due to the danger involved. Rather, one should recite it soon after the plane takes off.
You know, it's interesting, Ernie, over time, this changes as gaps between cities or communities are filled in with houses.
Right? Correct? This is the way it is now, but it could be different 20 years from now. Zman Tfilas Haderech b'Nesiya Baviron Eina Tolu b'Shir Shtei Parsos. Has nothing to do with the two parcels. Ela miyad k'shei tromem avirin ba'avir legova kazeh asher hein yipol. If you take off and you reach a height that if you fall, you'd be in danger, that's when you should recite it. Again, my minig always is to recite it as the plane pulls away from the gate.
Hey,
That's how I was taught to do it. Now, maybe other poskim have a different opinion. Rav Kamenetsky recommends reciting it while the plane accelerates on the runway. And Rav Heber notes that this is the prevalent practice today. If the airport is in town, one should ideally recite Tfilas Haderech on the runway shortly before takeoff. If one is concerned that he might forget, he may say it after the plane begins to taxi on the runway, even upon boarding the plane. B'diavad, if he forgot, he may also say it after takeoff.
Yep.
If the airport is out of town, one may say it on the way to the airport after leaving the built-up area. I don't think we have an area between Los Angeles and the LAX airport where there's no built-up area. That doesn't exist for us.
Oh, well, depends how the route you take, but it's a small area.
It's not 2.8 miles. You got to have 2.8 miles.
2.8 miles.
You must travel 2.8 miles, an area where there are no houses.
On La Cienega, where
and La Cienega, yes, where the oil rigs are.
yeah, unless you call that a built area.
But there are some
I don't think
houses
it's
on
I don't
top.
think it's a built. Well, there are houses there.
So when you're traveling on La Cienega and you're going through Kenneth Hahn State Recreational Area,
But is that a 2.8 mile distance? I don't think it is.
I'm looking right now. I'll tell you right now.
You
Well,
crossed over on Stryker.
Then there's some houses there.
So
There's houses
Well,
there.
it's oil fields
it's
and the
about,
park
it's
on the other
about,
side.
no, it's about 7,000 feet. So it's not,
5,000 feet is 1 mile.
right. I'm looking at Google Maps right now, so I can
So
see.
it doesn't, I think there is no area between our homes and the airport where there's a area that without built up houses of 2.8 miles.
That would be it, that one little area there.
I have never said Tfilas Haderech on the way to the airport. Just never,
Right.
no. Okay.
But my question about Palm Springs and.
Oh, listen to this. This is true. If the airport is out of town, one may say it on the way to the airport after leaving the built-up area. This is true, even if one would not recite Tfilas Haderech when just driving to the airport, i.e., going to that airport does not constitute a trip in and of itself. There's a well-known approach of the Ragat Shaver that one does not recite Tfilas Haderech on air travel because Chazal do not define travel to the air as a derech. Okay. Somebody wanted to make a comment?
Oh,
Yeah,
just-
I comment from last week's shir about Rav Soloveitchik used to have great fear when flying from Boston initially, from Boston to New York, going back to yeshiva, until he became accustomed to it. And his definition was not based on distance, but was based on the fear factor, the emotional content of the experience. So I would think that in using that definition, one could think of traveling on the road in Eretz Yisrael, especially in times of the current situation where you don't know if you'll be accosted by somebody, some Arab jumps out and starts to spray the road and its
bombs
travelers.
falling on-
So that
falling on the
anybody wanting
freeway.
to say Tfilas Haderech, because they're a fear of their lives, should be able to say it. And I'm surprised it's not even mentioned in here by the Tzurba people from Eretz Yisrael, because they're constantly faced, even in times of relative quiet, there's always incidents going on. And there are people who always say Tfilas Haderech when they get in a car and drive in Eretz Yisrael.
I
Well-
think it's a good point, particularly when you're traveling between cities. Yeah.
I mean,
know-
Ernie, is there a restriction from saying it if it's less than 2.8 miles? I mean,
Yeah, then you wouldn't say the bracha with the Shem of Hashem, with the Shem of Malchus. Baruch atah Hashem shomei tefillah. You wouldn't say that. You'd say Baruch atah shomei tefillah, without the Shem of Hashem. If you have any suffix or whatever, we learned that last week, that you would not say the Shem of Malchus. As a bracha levatala. That's the hakpada. That you're saying it when you weren't required to say it. According to the way Bernie is learning the Rav Soloveitchik thing, it becomes very subjective based on a person's individual fear. Okay, now 88. Must one stop walking or riding an animal to recite Tfilas Haderech? According to most opinions, one should recite Tfilas Haderech after one departs. On the other hand, halacha dictates that normally one should not engage in other actions or activities when reciting a bracha. See the Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah, Pninei Halacha. However, it should be noted that the Shulchan Aruch allows reciting Birchas Hamazon while walking, if one ate while walking, in order not to delay further. A similar approach may be relevant to Tfilas Haderech. Given these considerations, when should one recite Tfilas Haderech? So the Gemara in Brachas Lamed Amud Aleph, Hechi Matzi Lo. Rav Chizda Omer Me'umid, you should stand. Rav Sheshes Omer Afilu Ma'alech, even walking. Rav Chizda Rav Sheshes Rav Gazli Borchi. Rav Chizda Rav Sheshes were walking. Kan Rav Chizda Kamatzli. Rav Chizda stood and recited Tfilas Haderech. Amalei Rav Sheshes L'Shmaya. Rav Sheshes couldn't see. He was blind. My Kovid Rav Chizda. He asked his servant, what's Rav Chizda doing? Amalei Kayu Matzli is davening. Amalei Ukmenami lididi va'atzli. He said, okay, stand me up as well, and I will also daven. Mi yostov al tikra reya. He didn't hold that you had to stand, but if you can do it, you can try to do it. According to the Gemara, Rav Chizr and Rav Sheshes disagree as to whether one may recite Tefillah Saderech while walking, or do you have to stop and remain in one place? Rav Sheshes agrees that it's preferable to stop if you can. The Beis Yosef discusses whether riding an animal is similar to walking, and maybe one should dismount in order to recite Tefillah Saderech. Because of Rav Yoina, prepared Tefillah Shachar, the Tefillah Yotzei L'derech Nech L'kol Mefarshim. There's a machlokes by Tefillah Saderech. Yesh oimim shemaya rochuv ein tzarich leirid. If you're riding an animal, you don't have to go down. The lo adifa mit Tefillah Yud Ches, I mean in the lo yora. It's not more strict than Shmona Esrei. There, also we say you don't have to get off the horse. Some say that by Shemona Esrei you need special kavanah, then you shouldn't go off. Because he's not going to be able to concentrate, he'll be anxious due to the delay. But this tefillah saderech, it doesn't require so much kavanah. You should go off. However, as far as Rishon nearest Yoser, he says the first svara of being able to say it while riding operates. The Shulchan Aruch therefore rules that one who is walking should preferably stop to recite the bracha, but one need not dismount when riding an animal. Hayotz l'derech yispalel, yiratz l'vadech Hashem l'keinu 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 shalom v'chuli, v'tzorech lamer b'loshen rabim. You have to say it using plural. If he can, he should stop. If he's riding an animal, ein tzarich leirid. Mogen Avram qualifies the ruling that although one need not dismount from the animal, you should stop the animal. In his opinion, riding an animal is equivalent to walking. And just as it is preferable to stop walking if possible, so too, you should stop riding. You should at least stop the animal. The kaimel and roichev k'malech dami. Riding is like walking. The Mishnah Berurah added a few points of explanation to the Shulchan Aruch and accepts the ruling of the Magen Avram with respect to both one riding directly on an animal and one riding in a wagon pulled by an animal. Im efshar, kigon shachavrusa mamtenes, if the caravan will wait for you, so stop and say it. Yamad melelech, you should stop. Achim ikuv amidaso yatrichu muter lomer b'alach miyushiv. If the delay is going to be a problem, you can say it while you're walking or while you're sitting. And ein tzarich leir, you don't have to get off the horse. Shiyiridaso v'aliyaso tordaso, it cuts a tircha. If you can stop the animal from walking, do that. It's like riding is like walking. The same if you were sitting in a horse and buggy with an animal pulling a wagon. You don't have to get off. If you can stop the horses, that's better. What about reciting Tefillah Saderech in a car? What is the status of driving a car? Is it similar to riding an animal, and you should stop the car in order to recite Tefillah Saderech? Or is it less of an action? In Birchas Hashem, Rav Moshe Levi rules that a driver must stop his car. But according to the Yalkut Yosef, you're permitted to recite it while driving. I mean, how are you going to recite it while driving unless you know it by heart? If you know it by heart, I'm saying, otherwise, I guess a passenger could say it and you could answer amen to it. Okay.
Well, we had similar issues when we were talking about making a bracha while eating on driving, right? I mean, it was, if I
Yeah,
recall.
but you might know bracha by heart.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I think we also mentioned there, yeah, it'd be preferable to stop and have
Stop.
nothing to eat, but if you had to, for whatever reason, I think whatever, I don't remember the source, but it said you could eat, in fact, eat, right?
I remember that too. But there's less of an issue regarding reciting the bracha because people know the bracha by heart, but not everybody knows the tefillah saderech by heart. And therefore, if you're alone in the car, you certainly would have to stop.
But didn't we learn previously that davening, you should not daven while you're walking or driving?
That's exactly, or get off they wanted you, I said, we just went through the dispute of davening when you're riding a horse because of the kavana issue. But they thought that getting off the horse would interfere with your kavana, but at least you should stop the animal.
Obviously, they made a distinction when you're flying an airplane. You can't stop the airplane.
No, you can't stop the airplane, but we sit because they don't really allow us to stand the rules of the plane these days. But technically, because we saw that there was an opinion that you should stand.
So is it preferable to daven the tefillah you need to daven when you're at the airport before you get on the plane?
Why? What if it's
Havana, except
yeah, I would say, and also you could stand up, you could take the 3 steps back, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely, but the question is it the Zman? A lot of people who daven on the plane because you've started flying and now there's a Zman, and if you don't daven, you're going to miss the Zman of the tefillah. But I think it's preferable to daven before you get on the plane. Number 2, there might be a minyan. If you're flying on an El Al flight or something like that, in the airports, oftentimes there's a minyan, which is harder to do on planes these days. I was recently on a plane where there was a minyan in the back for Mincha and Ma'ariv. One of the first times in maybe 10 years that I saw that. Somebody was a chiyuv, they had a kaddish, and they allowed us to assemble a Mincha Ma'ariv minyan in the back where the galley is.
What airline?
It was El Al.
Oh, El Al's different. The only airline you can get away with that is El Al because they understand it, but I
But
wouldn't.
even El Al was pretty strict about it in the last few years. You see a lot of minyanim even on an El Al flight with talis and tefillin. I haven't seen that because they want people to sit in their seat. And then, has anybody seen a talis and tefillin minyan on an El Al flight? I have not seen that. I think that's because it became security rules. They don't want people gathering for too long periods of time in a plane. Rabbi Krauss, I remember, gave a drasha at Young Israel and said that it's almost usher to do, that you should daven talis and tefillin in your seat.
Yeah, I agree.
You could put your feet together during Shemona Esrei and all of that.
We discussed this a year ago.
Who, we did in
No.
Tzurba?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Did it bring it down?
we talked about this, about staying in our seats because of the Chil Hashem.
Yeah, because of neighbors, because
Yeah.
of the other people flying.
Yeah,
But I think there's security reasons for it too.
now there are also that, yeah.
Okay. So the Yalkut Yosef says, "I'm a halech baderech." If you're walking, im efshar yamad milechas kasher mavarach v'saderech, you should try to stop. Im haya rochev v'noseh b'mechonit. If he was riding an animal or driving a car, ein tzarich lered olatzras rechava. He says you don't have to stop to get off the horse or to stop the car. V'yachol omer tfilas haderech gam be'eit sherochev o noseh. You can say it while you're driving or riding. Rav Yosef disagrees with the Magen Avram's interpretation of the Shulchan Aruch and does not even require stopping an animal. The same approach is taken within the Shulchan Aruch by Rav Yosef's brother, Rav David Yosef, in Halacha Brura, who writes that stopping the animal or the cart to recite Tfilas Derech is only considered Midas Chasidus. Volume 10, Shiur 5, concerning reciting Kriya Shema while driving. There, the Yalkut Yosef is more stringent. By the way, I have volume 16. I have copies for everybody. So we're not going to be in volume 16 in a while, but we already have them. So I encourage everyone to come get it. It's also $17. And maybe the Valley guys, I'll send it with Jake, or we'll figure out some way to get it to you guys.
Thank you, Ernie.
Volume 16 is the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos. The Piskei Teshuvos takes the approach that the driver of a car is comparable to one riding an animal. Accordingly, he should ideally stop on the side of the highway to recite Tfilas Haderech. But if that's not safe, he may recite Tfilas Haderech while driving. He talks about modern transportation. That you can recite Tfilas Haderech while in transit. That's referring to, I guess, people on a subway or on a train. On the Hagatzmo, the driver himself, if he can stop the car b'shulei haderech on the side of the road, lo shum chashas sikun, without danger, ve'in dato tordot demachmas ikuv hanesiya, and his mind is not going to be crazy because of the delay that it's causing yasakin. He should pull over. In lav yomer tfilas haderech toch kedei nesiyos. 1 second.
You know, along the lines of, I guess, Bernie's comment, you know, on the question of davening on the plane versus davening in the terminal. Of course, if there's a minyan issue, that, you know, obviously what Ernie said makes sense. But I mean, you see these Muncie buses all the time. People are going to and from work, davening on the buses. You know, I guess when you're in a position of driving the animal or driving the vehicle, maybe that's where this is coming from. But if you're a passenger, your focus is a lot more attentive, and can be applied to the tefillah.
Absolutely. He absolutely. That's what I think he emphasizes here, that passengers can recite Tfilas Haderech while in transit without any problem. And of course there are, as you say, these famous minyan trains. Right, there's certain trains that go from here to here, and there's minyanim on it.
We did a whole shiur on this, Ernie, on Hilchos Tefillah.
Yeah, I agree. I remember it.
But it's interesting, I guess, it's different, is that Hilchos Tefillas Haderech, it would be, you know, it's meant for travel. So
Right.
you have to stop and pray, and you have to stop your animal or your car when you're saying Tfilas Haderech. That's because it's all about travel.
And they want you to have better kavanah. It's totally in kavanah. But then they say if by stopping it's going to worry you so much that it's delaying, then you should not stop.
Well, one of the things is that, so it's interesting. We had a bunch of discussions over here about, you know, when you can say Tfilas Haderech, when you're traveling in Chicago, you're traveling, you know, to Queens, when you're traveling on Highwood Freeway, right? Okay, there's a little place you can daven. Who in their right mind would stop? You can't stop on a bridge in a car. It's dangerous. You know, you can't do it.
Right? So that's why they said, since it's dangerous, you can do it while you drive. In a chanami.
However, the opposite side of the coin is that we very well know if we're involved in a conversation with somebody on the phone and driving, you are completely distracted or you are partially distracted from your drive on the road. And so you yourself are in sakana as you're driving, thinking Whether if you're in tefillah, and you try to put your kavana into your tefillah, you're not concentrating on the road to the same extent. So there are dangers both.
Well, if you're reading it from when you're trying to read Tfilas Derech from your phone, yeah, but if you have hands free, what's the issue?
You talk on the phone and then suddenly you realize you've gone 10 miles and you're just looking at the road again. You finish talking your conversation. You are distracted mentally.
Okay.
I had that happen once where I missed the exit and I had to, get off the next exit and come back.
I
And
think the real question would be,
that's happened to me in a car.
is that if you're
Well, I'm
driving,
fine.
if you're driving, but here's it, okay, if you're driving and you have to say Tfilas Derech and it's too dangerous to stop, but you don't know it by heart, what are you gonna do? You're gonna read it from your phone while you're driving?
No, you should pull over and recite it.
But what's the sakana to pull over? You're not gonna pull over on the bridge.
How about getting off
Of an exit.
Getting
Of
off
an
on the
exit.
exit? And then getting back on? You
So,
could
so one of the things is that I saw years ago, when I was in Israel in Bnei Akiva, all of these Bnei Akiva, the Bogrim, whatever, they all knew Tfilas Derech by heart.
right, because they were leading groups all the time. They
All
learned
the
how to
time.
do it. Right? Rishonim also address another aspect of the timing of Tfilas Derech, namely whether one must juxtapose it to a different bracha recited immediately beforehand. The Gemara, followed by most Rishonim, does not mention any specific requirement to recite a different bracha prior to Tfilas Derech. Although longer brachos that do not begin with the word Baruch generally are juxtaposed to a different bracha, which is called bracha smucha lechaverta. We saw the explanation of Rabbeinu Yonah in source 3 above, that it's not necessary with respect to Tfilas Derech. In other Rishonim, in their opinion, Tfilas Derech has the status of a tefillah, not a bracha. So the rules of bracha smucha lechaverta don't apply. However, the Tajbates, Katan, notes that the Maram apparently disagreed and would juxtapose Tfilas Derech to another bracha to comply with the regular guidelines for brachos. Vishoalti leMaram, lama Tfilas Derech chosemes b'baruch, hol ve'ena poseches b'baruch. How can you end up Baruch Atah Shomeh Tfilah where it didn't start with a bracha? Think about the bracha Elokai Neshama. We put it right after Asher Yotzar to make it a bracha smucha lechaverta. Most of us, you say Al Nitzil Sedayim, you say Asher Yotzar, and then Elokai Neshama, which concludes with it's a bracha. It's done that way because normally you don't. It's similar. Ava Rabbah, right, is a bracha. It's next to bracha, next to an opening bracha because of the rules of bracha smucha lechaverta. It's to close with a baruch, you got to open with a baruch. That's what they're dealing with here. And they're saying, he would recite Tfilas Derech connected to, for example, one of the Birchas HaShachar. And the opinion is mentioned by the Tur and Shulchan Aruch. Harami Rottenberg, Shayot L'Derech Baboker. He would recite Tfilas Derech immediately after the Yehi Ratzon, which is recited at the end of the Birchas HaShachar, Kedei Lasmicha LeBirchas HaGomel Chasodim V'Tiyei Bracha Smucha L'Chaverta. The Mishnah Berurah notes that this ruling appears to support the opinion of the Taz, that one may recite Tfilas Derech before departing. Before departing. Remember, because we learned some hold that you can only say it after you've left the city. The Taz said you could already start saying it even before you left. Nevertheless, the Mishnah Berurah explains that the Maram would only juxtapose it to the brachos when leaving early in the morning and davening on the way. Thus, Tfilas Haderech was recited at the beginning of the trip, in accordance with the majority of poskim who disagree with the Taz. Perush. When the Maram at Rottenberg would have to go early, quite a matfila, by Omer Abrachos B'derech Chaya Masmicha Tfilas Haderech Achayir Hiratzo. He would put the Tfilas Haderech after the Hiratzo. Aval Kishum Alech Acharat Tfila, but if he's going on his way after davening, so you've said Birchas HaShachar an hour ago, and Yochalomet Tfilas Haderech Kodim Atfila, Dalo Kol Ponim Asur L'Oimra Ad Shehechzik B'derech. You can't say the Tfilas Haderech unless you start on your trip. So the Mishnah Berurah also writes that when leaving later in the day, one should try to recite a bracha beforehand, such as Asher Yotzar or Bracha Mein Shalosh. Nevertheless, the ruling of the Maram is only intended as the Chatchila, and one's recitation of Tfilas Haderech is not compromised without it. So that means if you have a fruit, you can make a Bori Priya Eitz, I guess, and then say Tfilas Haderech. Or go to the bathroom and say Asher Yotzar to fulfill the Chatchila. You're traveling at 2 in the afternoon. You should, when the stewardess comes around offering you a glass of water or orange juice or a glass of wine, you should make a bracha and then say Tfilas Haderech. Bivarach bracha achrona, or yitol mayim, or go to the bathroom v'yom asher yotzar. U'makam shenyachol lasos kol. If you can't do any of this, let's say you don't have a fruit. V'gamu yoshev bagala ben anashim. You're in a wagon with people. They don't want to let him wait to get out and get up. You don't have to say another thing. The common Rishonim sovereign that Tfilas Haderech ain't stricha sheyatz mulchaverta. Some Rishonim don't hold of this din that the Tfilas Haderech has to be recited next to another bracha. How many times a day must you recite Tfilas Haderech? If one takes 2 or 3 short trips, or one stops in the middle of a longer trip, must one recite Tfilas Haderech a second or third time? The Kolbo writes that even though one stops during the journey in the middle of the day, one only recites Tfilas Haderech once. Kosuv Amaram, Adam ha'olech chutz li'ir eino tzarich lispal tfilas zu, kim pa'am achas, b'tchilas hayom. You have multiple trips. You'll have to do it once. Vafilu im yanuch be'ir be'emsa derech. You're going to rest in the city. Sha'achas kiyotche misham eino tzarich lispal tfilas haderech pa'am acheres. The Shulchan Aruch accepts this ruling as well, except in the case where one stopped somewhere with intent to stay overnight, and then changed his mind and continued traveling. Afilu im yanuach ba'ir be'emsa hayom. You only say it once, even if you rested in the middle of the day. Aval im dato lolum be'ir. He wanted to stay in a hotel, but v'achar kach nimlach, he changes his mind. V'yatzami men lavor chutzala, and now he's traveling outside that city, or Lashul Lebei to go home. Also pamacheres. You have to say Tfilas Haderech a second time. What is the definition of day with respect to Tfilas Haderech? If one travels in the morning and then again at night, one would recite a new Tfilas Haderech at night. The Yalkut Yosef indicates that although the day usually follows the night in halacha, regarding Tfilas Haderech, the night follows the day. For this reason, he writes that if one travels a total of more than one parsa during the day, and the following night, one recites Tfilas Haderech. On the other hand, a trip begun at night, continued the following day, does not warrant reciting Tfilas Haderech if each trip alone was less than a parsa. Going and coming, it's a parsa. You went half of 2.8 miles in the morning. Umachatzisa balayla. That works. Avalimnasa balayla kachatzi shah. You traveled a half an hour at night. V'lan ba'ir acheres. and you rested in a different city. Ulamachos nasa od kashir shah, and then you traveled an hour the next day. Eina nesios mitztarfos v'yom tefillah sedech below shem malchus. You can't combine the two, and again, like you say tefillah sedech without the bracha. So far, we have seen that one only recites tefillah sedech once a day, even if one takes multiple trips. So I'm going to bring up the issue. Many of us, we fly. Let's say it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and then to a destination at 1 o'clock, and you get off the plane, still the same day, and 2 hours later you take another flight. Based on what we're learning here, I always say a new tefillah saderech on a new plane, but based on what we're learning here, it sounds like the tefillah saderech in the morning would suffice.
You know, it sounds like if it's on the leg of a journey of the same trip, it makes sense. But how about those people, and it happens once in a while, where you go to New York and you come back the same day? That seems like a whole different journey, even though it's the same day. You would think you would say it twice. But according to this, you only say it once.
Right? Right? The Pri Chodesh takes the approach that one only recites tefillah saderech on the first day of one's journey, but not every subsequent day. So he takes it even further. On the start of your journey, you should say the tefillah. But you're spending 3 or 4 days on the road. The Bach disagrees, requires that tefillah saderech be recited every day of the trip, regardless of where and when one slept. It's similar to the obligation to pray daily. When you start on the road again, you have to say it again. It's not like those who claim only on the first day. He had in mind to stay in a city. He changed his mind. To travel outside of it. There, you certainly have to say the tefillah saderech again. Certainly on the day when you leave that city, you have to say it again. Every day, you have to say Nu Shemona Esrei every day. He that says we didn't even have to write it. I have to write it to make sure the people who made mistakes. So according to the Bach, the ruling of Shulchan Aruch that one recites for derech more than once a day, if one changes his mind not to stay overnight, proves that if one indeed stayed overnight, one certainly recites tefillah saderech the next day, do the hesach hadas of sleeping. The Rabaz agrees that one must usually recite tefillah saderech every day on a multi-day trip, but he writes that if one did not stop in a set place, such as an inn, overnight, one would not recite it with the concluding bracha. She'elas mimeni a chacham anala yotza l'derech. A certain type of chacham that asked me a shaila. V'yesh malach coming yomim, and the journey is a few days. Im tzarich laspel tefillah saderech b'chol yom or dilma b'pamach hasagi. Is it just one time? Tshuva, im amalonu miyushav, if an inn is populated, shechayv v'lispal sham yud ches, the Radbaz here may have in mind that one who's in an unpopulated area is not obligated to recite a full Amida, but says the Havinenu because of danger. But if he's in an inhabited location, he must recite the Amida. And the setting out the next day is equivalent to beginning a new journey. It's simple that the next day when he goes on the road again, he has to say a new tefillah saderech. It's like a new journey. If it's not populated, perhaps it's considered one journey. If he dwelt in a place that is not occupied, You travel day and night. So in the morning, when you first went out on the journey, you should say Baruch Atah Hashem Shemet Tfilah. V'shar Yomim V'arach V'lo Yachtum. The other days you shouldn't be Messiah with a bracha. Uchshagir liyishuv yispal yudches l'Hashem atfilah smuchalo she'alev v'lo yoser. And then when you arrive at the town, you pray Shemona Esrei to make up for the one you missed while traveling. But only once, because there's only one Tashlumim for Tefillah. Tashlumim is an instance of Chazal which we learn to compensate for missed Tefillah by reciting it twice at the next Tefillah. Tashlumim will be utilized to compensate for the most recent Tefillah missed. You can't compensate for others. The Mishnah Berurah rules that one recites for Derech every day of the trip, unless one travels without stopping through the night. Similar to the Radvaz. Davi Yasser Chadas. By stopping overnight, you got your mind, on something else. Kosher kenim lon. If you slept, derech bushpiz v'layla tzarich levarach b'boker. Achim noseh kol halayla. Even if he's going to travel all night, Ainu shein lon b'kviyus bushpiza. He doesn't live there. Rak yanuach ezubad. He should rest. Man bushpiz v'ach kach choizel in soa. Then he goes back on his trip. Yesh levarach v'yos derech b'boker b'li chasima. Again, you should do it without a chasim. Now, what about reciting tefillah derech on behalf of others? Can you recite it on behalf of a large group of people using a microphone or amplifier, like on a chartered bus? He rules that one may recite it for everyone else, but only if the people can hear his voice without a microphone. If you take away the speaker, you'd be able to hear his voice. It's just helpful for him, but they could hear him without it. Then as long as they have kavanah, he has kavanah to be motzi them. Reciting Tefillah Saderach using a microphone parallels using a microphone in other instances, such as reciting the Megillah. See the Tzurba M'Rabanan reciting through electronic means for more information.
Although we know that the Jewish tour groups that are on buses, the leader reads the Tefillah Saderach on a microphone.
As long as you can hear his voice without it, it's okay.
But the people in the back certainly can't hear it.
Then they're not, according to the Yalkut Yosef.
That's right. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
The Yalkut. Now, the question is why? Meaning, what's wrong with the electronic amplification? I understand Megillah, you have to hear, there's an issue, maybe you're hearing the echo, and by Megillah, there's a chiyuv. So I understand, I'm not sure. It considers he didn't hear it. I have to evaluate, I have to learn that again. I understand by the Megillah. Why should it apply to a regular bracha? The Yalkut Yosef discusses whether one individual who has already recited Tefillah Saderach may recite it on behalf of someone else. He rules that although normally this would be permitted, it's not allowed in the case of Tefillah Saderach. Mi shebirach Tefillah Saderach, v'chaver shayimo v'nesiyah lo shamas bracha. His friend hasn't heard it. He asked the guy to do it again. Ein lo lechos levarech, machar shekvar birch v'yotzi dechova. Aval pisha amru, aval pisha yotza motzi, lo amru kain el birchas hamitzvos. That's like kiddush or a bracha. You can, for example, if someone made kiddush and someone needs kiddush, you can make it again because of arvus, because of din of mitzvah. But for example, birchas nanin, if I have already been, I can't do it for the other person. So you wouldn't say it. What about women and Tfilas Haderech? Logically, one would say women should be obligated, since they too benefit from asking Hashem to help them arrive. The Eliyahu Rabbah commented regarding women reciting Kriyat Shema before going to sleep. That saying Kriyat Shema when you go to sleep, you should do it. The women should do it. The fact that there was a minhag for women not to do it, it's a mitzvah tied to time at night, so they didn't do it. But this has to do with protection. Men require protection, not women. Rav David Auerbach writes in Alichos Beisa that women are obligated to recite Tfilas Haderech. Rav Menachem Nissel writes in regular Shelei that a woman may also recite Tfilas Haderech on behalf of a man. For example, if a man is taking a trip with his wife, he may prefer that she recites it for him if he's driving, since we learned earlier that a passenger may recite it in transit as opposed to a driver, who some opinions hold should preferably stop before reciting if possible. A man may fulfill his obligation to Tfilas Haderech by listening to a woman recite it and responding on it. Women have the same chiyuv. It's not like by Megillah, a man has a chiyuv to read it, and a woman has a chiyuv to hear it. They have a different chiyuv, so one can not be motzah the other. It's very common. A woman is traveling in the car with her husband. The husband is the driver. It's hard for him to stop it off the road. He doesn't know it by heart. So Chaim asked this. Rav Ephraim Greenblatt. I was zocha to meet Rav Ephraim Greenblatt in Los Angeles, in the back of Tzvika Reisman's home, and I visited Rav Ephraim Greenblatt in his home in Beit Vagan. He was the posek in Memphis, Tennessee. He was the Talmud Muvik of Rav Moshe Feinstein. And after Rav Moshe Feinstein's death, he was considered one of the major poskim in America. People would ask, he was called the Rivavos Ephraim. He has a many volume halacha sefer called Rivavos Ephraim, Greenblatt. Here it says Shlita, but you notice, because he just passed away a few years ago, so they've now put Tzatzal. Let's conclude with a machshava, and next week we'll start Birchas HaGomel. We have seen this year that due to the changes in the nature of modern travel, poskim disagree in many cases whether an obligation to recite Tfilas Haderech exists. One should keep in mind that, as we have seen a number of times in the course of the Shir, one may still recite Tfilas Haderech without mentioning Hashem's name in the concluding bracha. The Shla, from Yeshaya Horowitz writes that reciting Tfilas Haderech is a wonderful method of protection to ensure that one arrives safely. If you're someone who knows Tfilas Haderech by heart, it'll help your travels. And it'll help you be safe. If you don't say it, you might be in danger. Reb Chaim Elazar Shapira, in his Nimukei Orach Chaim, notes that Rav Yechezkel Shraga Halberstam, the Shinover Rebbe, strongly urged people to recite Tfilas Haderech despite the halachic considerations for not doing so today, as he was saved from harm due to its merits. By saying that our roads are not dangerous. Uvifrat b'nesia alaban, train ride. Onam be'emet hinakol yifatze pihem. Their words don't mean anything. As he heard from the Saba Kadisha, the Shinover, we have to say this tefillah in our day. Be careful. In his youth, he was careful about Tfilas Haderech, and he had some miracles. the danger to life and murders, the Gama Merkavot, Hakitor, the locomotive trains, Mavgiot Merkavot, Vamachavonot, Afichatan Yitzian Chutz L'Shita. They collide with other trains, they go off their tracks. Rachmana Litzlan Mikolelu Biprat. Ala automobilin, the cars. Asher Usakonis Kafoshes Yosher Mikol Agolos. Danger more than the wagons. Hashem Yishmer V'Yatzilenu. Modern transportation has developed since the time of Rav Shafira, and train, plane, and car travel is significantly safer than it was in his day. Nevertheless, the notion that Tfilas Haderech can protect one who says it from harm is quite relevant today. As mentioned, even if one adopts the opinion that one should not recite Tfilas Haderech today, or one drives to a destination without leaving the city limits, one may still recite the tefillah without the concluding bracha. We will conclude by quoting Harav Kook in Ein Aya, his work on the Agada of Masechta Brachos. Rav Kook writes beautifully that Eliyahu's comments in the Gemara to consult your Creator and go means that Tfilas Haderech is when we ask Hashem for protection, not only from physical danger on our journey, but also to help us properly respond to new situations and challenges, which may not always be appropriate if we do not first properly prepare ourselves. Every new situation needs protection. New challenges and emotions. We see when people travel, their level of ethics are reduced when they change locations. When you go on the road, you should prepare yourself for your new situations. That means prepare yourself. Fear of love of Hashem together with maintaining your ethics. We know people who travel, the traveling salesman, the jokes about the traveling salesman. We always think of Tfilas Haderech as protecting us from physical harm, but he's emphasizing the spiritual harm that can happen when people travel. They're alone, they're out with their wife, etc. So he's giving us a lot of things to think about. Okay, questions, comments, Ha'arot.
Yeah.
Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you, Ernie.